Glenn Miller was one of the biggest names in American music, a man whose songs filled dance halls and radios across the country. Then, in December 1944, he simply vanished during a short flight over the English Channel, leaving behind one of the most confusing mysteries of World War II. In this video, we take a closer look at the case, the investigations, and the claims that kept the mystery alive for nearly a century. Join us as we uncover the truth behind Glenn Miller's mysterious crash. Musical beginnings. Glenn Miller was born as Alton Glenn Miller on March 1, 1904, in the small town of Clarinda, Iowa. Few people could have guessed that this quiet boy would grow up to become one of the most famous bandleaders in American history. Long before his name became linked with hit songs and sold-out performances, Miller spent his early years moving from place to place with his family and searching for a future in music. When Glenn was still young, his family left Iowa and moved several times. They lived in Missouri, then Nebraska, and later settled in Colorado. These moves were often connected to work opportunities and the family's efforts to build a better life. While the frequent changes may have been difficult, they exposed Glenn to different communities and experiences during his childhood. Music became an important part of his life at an early age. As a teenager, he developed a strong interest in the trombone. Unlike many young people who simply treated music as a hobby, Glenn spent countless hours practicing and improving his skills. He also became interested in the growing popularity of dance band music. During the 1910s and 1920s, dance halls were becoming major entertainment centers across the United States, and big bands were drawing large crowds. While attending high school in Colorado, Glenn played in local bands whenever he had the chance. These performances gave him valuable experience and strengthened his desire to make music his career. After graduating, he enrolled at the University of Colorado. However, his attention remained focused on music rather than academics. He continued playing in bands and taking opportunities to perform professionally. Eventually, Glenn faced a choice between staying in school and pursuing his musical ambitions full-time. He chose music. He left the University of Colorado and headed into the professional music world. It was a risky decision because success in the music business was far from guaranteed, especially during a time when many talented musicians were competing for the same opportunities. Throughout the 1920s, Miller worked as a freelance trombonist. This meant he played wherever work was available rather than being tied to a single group. He performed with various bands and gradually built a reputation as a dependable musician. The work was not always steady, and financial security was often uncertain, but every performance helped him gain experience. As his career progressed, Miller earned opportunities to play with some of the most respected bandleaders of the era. He worked with the band of Ben Pollack, one of the leading figures in jazz at the time. He also played with Red Nichols, another well-known musician and bandleader. These experiences allowed Miller to learn from successful professionals and better understand what audiences wanted from a dance orchestra. Despite his growing experience, recognition did not come easily. The music business of the late 1920s and early 1930s was highly competitive. Many bands were fighting for radio time, recording contracts, and live bookings. Miller was talented, but he was still searching for the sound and style that would make him stand out from everyone else. Before we continue, I want to share something that I think is genuinely important for anyone watching this. Researchers at the University of Rochester published a discovery about the human brain that most doctors still haven't told their patients about. They found that the brain has its own dedicated cleaning system, and that most memory loss happens when that system gets blocked, not because of aging. If you're over 45, you need to see this. Go to brainresearchreport.com or just click the link in the description below. Don't skip past it. Now let's get back to the video. Determined to move beyond being a sideman, he eventually tried forming his own band. Unfortunately, the effort did not succeed. The group struggled financially and failed to attract enough business to survive. The band eventually collapsed, leaving Miller disappointed and facing another setback in his career. Still, he refused to quit, and the breakthrough he had been chasing for years was finally getting closer. The Glenn Miller Orchestra. By the mid-1930s, Glenn Miller had already spent years working as a musician, arranger, and bandleader. He had experienced success in small ways, but he still had not achieved the breakthrough he wanted. His first attempt at leading a band had failed, and many people in the music industry doubted whether he could ever become a major star. Instead of giving up, Miller focused on improving his skills and finding a sound that would set him apart from the many other orchestras competing for attention. During this period, Miller spent much of his time in New York City, which was one of the most important centers of the American music business. He worked as a studio arranger, creating musical arrangements for bands and recording sessions. This job allowed him to study successful orchestras closely. He paid attention to how different instruments blended together, how audiences reacted to certain sounds, and what made some bands stand out while others disappeared. While working behind the scenes, Miller became increasingly interested in developing a unique style. He understood that simply copying popular swing bands would not be enough. There were already many talented groups performing energetic swing music. If he wanted lasting success, he needed something listeners would instantly recognize. One of the ideas that began to take shape was what would later become his signature sound. Miller experimented with placing a clarinet above a section of saxophones, creating a smooth and rich tone that sounded different from other bands of the era. This clarinet-led saxophone section became one of the most important features of his music. Rather than focusing only on loud brass instruments and fast-paced arrangements, Miller aimed for a cleaner and more polished sound that could appeal to a wider audience. In 1937, he decided it was time to try leading his own orchestra again. He formed what became the first Glenn Miller Orchestra. Despite his hard work and confidence in the group, success did not come quickly. The band struggled to attract large audiences, and bookings were often difficult to secure. Competition was fierce, with established band leaders already dominating radio broadcasts, record sales, and dance halls across the country. The orchestra's financial problems soon became impossible to ignore. Expenses continued to grow, while profits remained low. Before long, the band was forced to disband. For Miller, it was another painful setback. Many musicians would have accepted defeat after a second major failure, but he refused to abandon his goal. After the collapse of the orchestra, Miller went back to work and began reorganizing his plans. He continued refining his musical ideas and searching for ways to improve the band's appeal. Record companies and booking agents were not always enthusiastic about his approach. Some industry figures questioned whether his smoother style could compete with the more aggressive swing bands that were popular at the time. Miller remained convinced that audiences wanted something different. Instead of chasing trends, he focused on creating music that was easy to listen to, dance to, and remember. His arrangements emphasized melody, precision, and consistency. This smoother and more commercial approach would eventually become one of the biggest reasons for his success. Although several of his early recordings failed to become major hits, they served an important purpose. Musicians, producers, and industry executives began noticing the distinctive sound he was creating. The records may not have sold in huge numbers, but they helped establish Miller's reputation as an innovative arranger and determined bandleader. By 1938, years of experimentation, rejection, and persistence were finally starting to pay off, and the success that had escaped him for so long was now just around the corner. Chart domination. After years of setbacks, Glenn Miller finally reached the turning point that changed his life. In 1938, he reorganized his orchestra once again, bringing together talented musicians and fully committing to the distinctive sound he had spent years developing. This version of the Glenn Miller Orchestra would become one of the most successful bands in music history. The timing was important. Swing music was at its peak in the United States, and audiences were looking for bands that could provide both exciting dance music and memorable melodies. Miller believed his smoother, more polished style could stand out from the competition. This time, his confidence proved correct. One of the biggest steps forward came through his recording contract with RCA Victor and its Bluebird Records label. The partnership gave Miller a larger platform and access to a national audience. Through these recordings, listeners across the country were finally able to hear the unique sound that made his orchestra different from many others of the era. The breakthrough arrived with Tuxedo Junction. Released in 1940, the song became a massive hit and helped launch Miller into the top ranks of American bandleaders. The record sold extremely well and received widespread radio play. Suddenly, the orchestra that had once struggled to stay together was becoming one of the hottest acts in the country. Following that success, the hits kept coming. Perhaps no song became more closely associated with Miller than In the Mood. The upbeat tune quickly became one of the defining songs of the swing era. Audiences loved its energy, and it became a favorite at dance halls across America. Even decades later, it remains one of the most recognizable recordings from the big band period. Another major success was Moonlight Serenade. Unlike some of his faster dance numbers, this song showcased the smooth and elegant sound Miller had worked so hard to create. It became the orchestra's signature theme and helped strengthen his reputation for producing polished, high-quality music. Then came Chattanooga Choo Choo, one of the biggest records of his career. Featured in the movie Sun Valley Serenade, the song became a national sensation. It sold in enormous numbers and further increased Miller's popularity. By this point, his orchestra was dominating record charts and attracting attention everywhere it performed. Radio played a major role in his success. During this era, radio was the primary source of entertainment for millions of Americans. Glenn Miller and his orchestra appeared on numerous broadcasts, allowing people who had never attended a live performance to hear the band regularly. These broadcasts helped turn Miller into a national celebrity. At the same time, the orchestra maintained an exhausting touring schedule. The band traveled constantly, performing in theaters, ballrooms, hotels, and other venues throughout the country. Demand for tickets was often extremely high, and audiences packed venues wherever the orchestra appeared. Miller was known for running a disciplined organization. He expected musicians to arrive on time, perform professionally, and maintain high standards. Rehearsals were taken seriously, and attention to detail was a major part of the band's success. While some musicians found the rules strict, the results were clear. The orchestra consistently delivered performances that audiences loved. By 1941 and 1942, Glenn Miller had become one of the most famous entertainers in America. His records dominated charts, his concerts attracted huge crowds, and his music was heard everywhere. As World War II intensified, he stood at the peak of his career with popularity few bandleaders could match. But just as his success reached its highest point, Glenn Miller made a surprising decision that would change the course of his life forever: military enlistment. At the height of his fame, Glenn Miller made a decision that surprised many people. By 1942, he was one of the biggest names in American music. His records were selling in huge numbers, his concerts were drawing large crowds, and his orchestra was among the most successful bands in the country. Yet, instead of continuing to build his commercial success, Miller chose to put his career on hold and support the war effort during World War II. The United States had entered the war after the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941. Like many Americans, Miller wanted to contribute. He believed music could play an important role in supporting soldiers and boosting morale. In 1942, he voluntarily disbanded his highly successful orchestra and began seeking a way to serve. At first, his efforts were not successful. Miller was already 38 years old, which was considered older than the typical military recruit. Because of his age, he initially faced rejection when trying to join the armed forces. However, he remained determined and continued pushing for a role where his musical skills could be used to help the military. Eventually, he was accepted as a civilian contractor working with the Army before later receiving a commission in the U.S. Army Air Forces. Rather than serving in a combat role, Miller focused on what he knew best: music. His goal was to create a military band that could entertain troops, improve morale, and provide a connection to home for soldiers serving far away from their families. Miller organized what became the Army Air Force Band, a large and highly skilled musical group. He carefully selected talented musicians and worked hard to create a sound that combined military music with the popular swing style that troops enjoyed. The band quickly gained attention for its professionalism and quality. The performances served an important purpose. Soldiers often faced difficult and stressful conditions, and entertainment offered a temporary escape from the realities of war. Miller believed that music could lift spirits and help maintain morale among service members. His band performed at military bases, camps, and special events, reaching thousands of troops. In 1944, Miller moved his operations to England as Allied forces prepared for major campaigns in Europe. From there, he expanded his efforts and worked to bring music directly to troops stationed overseas. His presence in England placed him much closer to the front lines than he had been in the United States. The Army Air Force Band performed extensively throughout Britain and for Allied personnel in various locations. Miller also became involved in radio broadcasting. Programs featuring his band were transmitted through the BBC and military radio stations, allowing soldiers across Europe to hear familiar music. These broadcasts became extremely popular and helped maintain a connection between troops and the culture they had left behind at home. As Allied forces advanced across Europe in late 1944, plans were made to move Miller's operations to the European continent. Paris had recently been liberated, and military leaders wanted entertainment programs established there as quickly as possible. Miller was expected to play a major role in those efforts. Before leaving England, he completed several final performances and broadcasts that were documented by military records and witnesses. At the time, there was nothing unusual about these appearances. They seemed like the next step in a successful mission to entertain Allied troops. No one realized that the journey to France would soon become one of the most famous and mysterious disappearances of World War II, the final flight. On December 15, 1944, Glenn Miller prepared for what seemed like a routine trip from England to France. The famous band leader had been working tirelessly to entertain Allied troops during World War II, and he was expected in Paris to help organize musical programs for soldiers stationed there. Nothing about the journey suggested that it would become one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in military and music history. Miller's departure point was RAF Twinwood Farm in Bedfordshire, England. The airfield had become closely associated with him during his time in Britain, serving as a base for many of his activities and broadcasts. On that morning, Miller planned to travel to Paris ahead of his orchestra's arrival so that preparations could begin for upcoming performances. He was scheduled to fly aboard a single-engine Nordøen Norseman aircraft. The Norseman was a Canadian-built utility plane commonly used during the war. It was known for carrying passengers and cargo and was widely operated by military forces. Although generally considered reliable, the aircraft was not equipped with some of the advanced navigation and safety systems that later became standard in aviation. Also aboard the plane were Pilot Flight Officer John Morgan and Lieutenant Colonel Norman Basel. The flight itself was expected to be relatively short. Once airborne, the aircraft would cross the English Channel before continuing toward Paris. However, conditions on December 15th were far from ideal. Reports from the period described cold weather, freezing temperatures, and poor visibility across parts of the route. Winter weather had already disrupted some flights in the region. Pilots operating over the channel often faced challenges caused by fog, ice, and rapidly changing conditions. Despite these concerns, the decision was made to proceed. The aircraft took off from RAF Twinwood Farm and headed toward France. What happened next remains uncertain. The plane never arrived in Paris. When Miller failed to appear, confusion began almost immediately. Officials expected the aircraft to reach its destination within a reasonable period of time, but there was no sign of it. Communication systems during World War II were not as advanced as modern aviation networks, making it difficult to track aircraft once they were in flight. One of the most puzzling aspects of the disappearance was the complete lack of communication from the aircraft. No distress signal was received. No emergency message was transmitted. There were no reports from the crew indicating trouble. The plane simply vanished somewhere along its route. As military personnel attempted to determine what had happened, search efforts produced very little information. No confirmed wreckage was found in the English Channel. No bodies were recovered. No verified witness accounts explained the aircraft's final moments. The absence of physical evidence made the case especially difficult to investigate. The military faced another challenge as news of Miller's disappearance spread through official channels. Glenn Miller was not just another officer. He was one of the most famous entertainers in the world. His disappearance carried enormous public interest, and military authorities wanted accurate information before making announcements. As a result, reports to the public were not immediate. Officials spent time attempting to verify facts and gather information before releasing details. During this period, rumors naturally began to circulate. Some people believed the aircraft had crashed at sea, while others wondered whether there might be another explanation. Eventually, military authorities reached the only conclusion supported by the available evidence. Glenn Miller was officially classified as missing in action while on active duty. It was a designation that reflected the uncertainty surrounding the case. Without wreckage, survivors, or definitive proof of what had occurred, investigators could not provide a clear answer. More than a simple aviation accident, Miller's disappearance quickly became a mystery, and in the years that followed, countless theories would emerge to explain what really happened on that cold December day. Official investigations. After Glenn Miller disappeared over the English Channel, both British and American military authorities began looking into what might have happened. But from the start, they ran into a serious problem. There was almost no physical evidence to work with. No wreckage was recovered, no radio distress call was received, and no clear witnesses could confirm what happened in the final minutes of the flight. The investigation involved both the Royal Air Force and the U.S. military. They reviewed flight plans, weather reports, and aircraft performance data. However, even after all this review, they could not reach a final, confirmed explanation. The case remained open-ended, with only theories available. One of the most widely discussed explanations is engine failure caused by carburetor icing. In cold weather, ice can form inside an aircraft's engine system, blocking airflow and causing the engine to lose power. On December 15, 1944, weather conditions over the English Channel were reported to be very cold, with low clouds and poor visibility. Some aviation experts later suggested that the plane, a single-engine Nordøen Norseman, could have experienced sudden engine failure if ice formed during the flight. If that happened, the pilot would have had very little time to react over open water. Another possibility considered was pilot error or navigational mistake. Flying over the English Channel during wartime was not easy. Pilots often had limited tools compared to modern standards, and visibility could change quickly. If the aircraft drifted off course, it could have entered unsafe conditions or run low on fuel without realizing it in time. Even a small navigation error in poor weather could have had serious consequences. Some reports also raised the possibility of a mid-air collision. During World War II, the skies over England and northern France were extremely busy with military flights. Bombers returning from missions, transport aircraft, and patrol planes were constantly moving through the same airspace. One theory suggested that Miller's plane may have collided with a returning Allied bomber that did not report the incident, possibly because it was unaware of the impact or because of wartime confusion. However, no confirmed records of such a collision were ever found. A major issue in solving the case was the lack of radar coverage. In 1944, radar technology was still limited. It could track aircraft in certain regions, but not continuously or with high detail over long distances, especially over water. Once Miller's plane left radar range, it essentially disappeared from official tracking systems. This made it nearly impossible for investigators to reconstruct the exact flight path or final moments. Wartime secrecy also made the investigation more complicated. During World War II, military authorities often restricted the release of information for security reasons. Details about flight routes, missions, and aircraft movements were not always shared publicly or even fully recorded in accessible archives. This meant that some information that might have helped investigators was either incomplete or classified at the time. After reviewing all available evidence, both RAF and U.S. officials reached the same general conclusion. They stated that Glenn Miller's aircraft likely went down accidentally over the sea, most likely due to weather conditions, mechanical failure, or navigational issues. However, they also admitted that there was no conclusive proof for any single explanation. Because of this lack of evidence, the official stance has remained unchanged for decades. Glenn Miller was lost in an accidental disappearance over the English Channel while on active duty. Even today, no single theory has fully solved what happened in those final moments, and the mystery only deepens when looking at what people later claimed about his fate. The Paris rumors. While the official explanation of Glenn Miller's disappearance points to an accidental crash over the English Channel, not everyone accepted that version. Over the years, several alternative stories began to circulate. The most well-known and controversial of these is the Paris brothel rumor, which suggests that Miller may never have actually boarded the plane on December 15, 1944. According to this rumor, Miller allegedly traveled to Paris separately and died there instead of during the flight. Some versions claim he suffered a sudden medical emergency, such as a heart attack, while in a Paris brothel. Other versions go further, suggesting he may have been involved in an espionage-related situation connected to wartime intelligence activity. These claims were never supported by official records, but they continued to spread in different forms. After the war ended, a few memoirs and unofficial accounts began mentioning unusual stories about Miller's final days. However, many of these sources were not written by direct witnesses. Some were second-hand stories, while others were based on speculation rather than verified facts. Over time, these accounts were repeated and changed, creating multiple versions of the same rumor. One variation of the story suggests that Miller died of a heart attack in Paris shortly after arriving. Another version claims he may have been assassinated, possibly because of sensitive wartime connections or secret activities. There are also accounts that suggest an accidental overdose, though none of these claims are backed by medical records or military reports. Each version differs in important details, and none of them can be confirmed through reliable evidence. A more extreme version of the rumor claims that military authorities covered up Miller's real cause of death. According to this idea, the official report of a plane disappearance was created to protect his reputation or to avoid public confusion during wartime. Some supporters of this theory argue that hiding the truth would have been easier than explaining an unusual or politically sensitive death in occupied Europe. However, when investigators and historians have reviewed these claims, they have consistently found a lack of solid evidence. There are no confirmed documents showing that Miller arrived in Paris on December 15th. Military flight logs, departure records from RAF Twinwood Farm, and witness accounts all support the fact that he boarded the aircraft for the scheduled flight. These records place him on the plane shortly before its departure, not in Paris. Another major issue with the Paris brothel rumor is timing. Official records show that Miller's flight was scheduled, approved, and tracked up to takeoff. There is no documented gap that would allow for a separate, unrecorded trip to Paris before the flight. Military coordination during wartime was strict, especially for high-profile personnel traveling between England and France. Despite these contradictions, the rumor has continued to appear in books, documentaries, and online discussions. Part of its appeal comes from the mystery surrounding Miller's disappearance. When there is no confirmed wreckage or clear explanation, alternative stories tend to gain attention, even if they are not supported by facts. Historians generally agree that while these stories are interesting, they do not match the available evidence. The official timeline, supported by military records and multiple independent sources, remains the most reliable account of what likely happened. Still, the persistence of the Paris brothel rumor shows how powerful unanswered questions can become when history leaves room for uncertainty. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because we've got more untold stories coming your way.